Are you a 3PL spending more time and money than you'd like recruiting and onboarding logistics roles? Then it's time to check out Rapido Solutions Group, the leaders in nearshore logistics staffing. Located right next door in Mexico, they have access to the freight talent you need. From carrier sales to tracking and tracing and everything in between, they can do the heavy lifting for you. So if you're ready to get your time back and want to move fast, check out Rapido Solutions Group. Visit gorapido.com to get started today. Have you heard about Bitfreighter and the EDI revolution? Bitfreighter helps companies automate communication with their freight partners through unlimited messaging and quoting. Traditional providers can't say that. The Bitfreighter team is also available 24/7 and responds immediately by phone, email, or yes, even text. Legacy providers can't say that either. So if you want to scale your operations to save time and money, come join the EDI revolution with us. Visit bitfreighter.com to get started today. Hello, and welcome to the Bootstrapper's Guide to Logistics, the podcast highlighting founders doing it the way that doesn't get a lot of attention. We're here to change that by sharing their stories and inspiring others to take the leap.
It's a roller coaster ride. You might ultimately fail.
That's when I kind of knew I was onto something.
It was very hard.
It truly is building a legacy.
The more life you live, the more wisdom you have.
Because we are where we're supposed to be, kind of answering the call.
Don't shoulder entrepreneurship on your own.
I'm your host, Nate Schutz. Let's build something together from the ground up. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the show. This week, I'm excited to chat with my new friend, John Sanford, who's the founder and CEO of CNT Logistics. He has a humble story that I think a lot of you are going to relate to and like, and we're going to unpack what is it really truly like in the early days of bootstrapping in the logistics industry when you're doing it the old-fashioned way. That's what we're all about here is celebrating the underdog, the folks that are building companies the way that they used to be built hundreds of years ago or decades ago before venture capital was a thing. So with that, please welcome to the show, John Sanford. John, how are you today?
Hey, good morning, Nate. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. When we first connected, there are a couple of parts of your story that resonated with me immediately, but I want to start first on the family side because I know CNT is a family business at its core. So what were the conversations like within the family on, hey, let's go start a logistics business together?
Well, it was one of those things where there weren't a bunch of other good options at the time.
Okay.
I had owned a commercial security company before, and that had, when the economy tanked in 2008, 9, didn't really have anywhere to go. My dad and I were sitting around the kitchen table one morning, and we're just talking about options of things to do. And he had a buddy in his morning golf group that was doing some LTL brokerage, and we got to talking about it and decided, why not us? And that was kind of the genesis of what ended up being CNT.
So did your dad's golf buddy then end up taking him under his wing and teaching him brokerage, or how did you go about learning it?
No, there was no training. I had zero brokerage experience. My father he opened the first non-regulated intermodal container operation in the U.S. back in 1973 in Savannah. Wow. And owned several other asset-based trucking companies. He started Landstar's container division, started Joe Land's container division. So I had been around logistics my whole life, mainly in the container space. Okay. And I had worked for an asset-based container operation in the safety department in Charleston. But that was the extent of my transportation experience prior to day one, first piece of freight. So,
but you're second generation then into the industry, and the deregulation movement in the 70s and 80s. I think it's so long ago it feels like, but it was a completely different world back then. And if you didn't have the right licenses or permits or relationships, you couldn't even do brokerage. There wasn't such a thing unless you were, with the in crowd.
For sure. And it was, back in the early 70s, it was a lot of trips to Washington and New York. And he really, led the, I don't know that he led the charge for the deregulation, but he was part of that group of people that really pushed the government to release that piece. But Southern Intermodal Logistics, as the story was told to me, I've never fact checked that. So
Okay.
I've kind of gone with that. Maybe it was the first one in Savannah. So don't hold me to it. But the lore of that has always been exciting to me. That look at this is pretty cool. So, but no, Dad's golf buddy, a guy by the name of Alan Bogardus, was part of a group of ex LTL salespeople who had gotten with a Atlanta-based software provider, and they had created this SQL-based TMS system. By today's measure, would be like a VCR or something older than that, a phonograph maybe. But and he went out and negotiated some LTL rates for us. Very, very good LTL rates. Without that piece of it, we would have never been able to get started. So, big props to him. He didn't really have to help us. And I think once he started helping us, he regretted it because we knew so little. And he he always treated me like a child. I definitely was a child, when it comes to brokerage. But he did a good job, kind of giving some guardrails and whatnot. But they pretty much just turned us loose. And my dad, the original plan was to put together this LTL package, so to speak, and take it to a company called Carolina National Transportation, which is based out of Mount Pleasant, which is South Carolina, which is the company that I work for, and they're family friends of ours. And they're an agency-based operation, and the idea is to put this brokerage package together, and take it to their agents, and so that their agents are already moving containers, but give them another offering to take to their customers. And so we put it all together, got the rates, hadn't moved the first piece of freight, and then went, and they have probably 25 or 30 agents, and went and talked to all of them. And every single one of them said no and thought it was a terrible idea. So we were left with this thing, and these really good LTL rates. So Dad and I split up all the freight forwarders down in Atlanta and started knocking on doors.
What was when you look back on that period? You said you didn't know anything, and your dad's golf buddy was maybe surprised. What were some of the early mistakes that you look back on and say, "Man, how did we do that?"
Oh gosh, I didn't know what an interline shipment was, and I had a customer that had something from Atlanta that needed to go to Maine, and put that on Southeastern Freight Lines. And didn't realize, and I got a rate that was $300 or $400, but I didn't realize that I didn't have rates with their partner in the Northeast called A. Dewey Powell, and I got a $6,500 bill back. I didn't know what freight classification was. I didn't know that anything that was longer than 8 feet was considered over length. I mean, I really didn't know anything. And it was, lessons like that that's how I learned. My dad has always had this saying about me, about how I tend to learn things. And he says, John, he has to go and get bloody. Meaning I like to learn things the hard way.
The hard way, it sounds like.
Unfortunately, it's somewhat true. So
I can top you. I had a time where I mixed up paperwork on 2 export shipments for a customer and accidentally sent the container that was supposed to go to Japan to the UK, and the container that was supposed to go to the UK to Japan.
Excellent.
So when somebody in Southampton, England, opened up the container, all of the product inside was labeled in Japanese because it was going to a Japanese company. And um, just a simple documentation in an email. I put the wrong container number and the wrong documentation. And um, those are humbling lessons to learn when you're young and learn in the industry that a simple oversight can cost lots and lots of money.
Absolutely. And add into that our vertical originally was this freight forwarder customs house broker market. And the the paperwork and the requirements to get that freight picked up from the airline or a CFS facility is very specific. And the the different boxes you've got to check to make sure that the freight gets picked up on time. I didn't know. I learned very quickly about that stuff. But the way the airlines handle that is you have 24 hours to get that freight picked up once it lands. After
Sure.
that, they start charging, 50 cents a kilo. So if you've got 1,000 kilos sitting there and it takes you 2 days to pick it up, your customer's like, you're going to need to pay me for this storage. And it's like, this was a local LTL move across Atlanta that I was, I might have made $20 on. So there were definitely lots of mistakes. And, unfortunately, I didn't really have anybody to help me.
Hmm.
So I spent a lot of time on the phone with the very nice people at Southeastern, and they kind of helped me move along once and a lot of times it's like, I didn't know that I needed to ask that question.
Yeah.
So, bumps and bruises, and I'm a very quick study. So, it probably took about a year though, because you don't see these problems constantly, so, they'll pop their head up every now and again. So,
So
but
let's go back to
yeah.
the early stages, though. I want to go back to this kitchen table. You said it was 2008, which is a really, really tough time. The economy was tanking. The housing market had crashed. A lot of founders that I talk to, in order to bootstrap, they take a couple of approaches. One is, I'm going to save a bunch of money for a couple of years in order to have enough money to start a business and not get paid. Because that's always the hard. If you're going from having a job to bootstrapping a business, the cash flow for the business takes priority, which means your personal expenses have to be covered a different way. How did you, coming out of a really, really hard time, how did you keep the lights on at home?
Oh, a bunch of different ways. I mean, I would cut grass. My buddy owned a construction company. Not good at construction, good at cleaning up and carrying lumber. And, I know the difference between this kind of saw and that kind of saw. So, would be the step and fetch it. Um, I did some security stuff on the side. That I probably shouldn't have been doing, but you know, but yeah, it was a lot, anything to make a little bit of money, and because there wasn't, I would say we probably went a year or a year and a half before we were making enough money to take any kind of meaningful money, and not even really meaningful,
Yeah.
but enough to it was probably a year and a half or 2 years of running freight and you know side hustle on the weekends, pressure washing. I mean, I may have blocked some of that stuff out of my mind, um,
And
but
it sounds like a combination of Dirty Jobs, the
oh
TV
yeah,
show,
yeah, for
and
sure.
a lot of, probably eating ramen noodles and, peanut butter sandwiches. But that I think there's something, I don't mean to overly romanticize it because I'm sure it wasn't fun. It had to suck on some level. But looking back on it now, what advice would you have to somebody who is thinking, yeah, I want to go start a logistics company, where also, again, a weird economic time. We don't know what's going to happen. Lots of people are losing their jobs, and the future is anything but certain. Is now a good time to start a business?
I mean, personally, I think so. I mean, the freight market, if you look at it over, um, the last 2 years, um, it was way up and then it's way down. But if you look at it over, over history, the freight market always comes back.
Hmm.
Goods and service. I mean, if you bought it, it came on a truck, and it just there's no way, outside of something, some catastrophe or
Yeah,
something like that. I think that it's hard to get yourself into position in a hot freight market, in my expert opinion. But I think that, being primed for when that recovery begins to happen really puts you in a much better place for success.
sure. I've heard someone say bear markets are for building. That
Mhm.
it's easy to try to climb into a market that's really, really hot, but you're usually late to the game. And then when the hard times come, you're not prepared for them because your company was birthed during a really good freight market. Whereas those who are right now or over the last 18 months have been starting humbly and small and building, they're preparing to ride the next wave when it inevitably comes, which is really exciting because a lot of the, I don't want to say mismanaged companies, but a lot of the companies that didn't mind their P's and Q's and take care of the pennies didn't make it. And so there's going to be less competition in the early stages of a freight recovery, is my opinion. I could be totally wrong. Um, but it's going to be exciting to watch the folks that preserved cash and took a really conservative approach. It's going to be fun to see them get some wins.
Oh, for sure. And I think you're seeing, in this huge exodus of freight brokers
Yeah.
leaving the market. I don't know what the percentage is, but and I don't know that to say most of them is accurate, but a lot of them got in 1920. They, that is not a normal 2021 and 22, especially for my business. That
Yeah.
was, it was 2 or 3x what it normally was. So that's not a normal cycle for sure. So
What are your favorite parts of running a business?
I think it's the people. Um, I've always enjoyed leading, and I enjoy interacting with folks. I enjoy celebrating wins. Uh, I enjoy teaching. Um, but I like, it may sound campy, but I like taking care of people that need help and they have options. And I like making sure that, their goods get to where they need to go. The But I like the people. I like.
How did you decide on the people for your own company then? As you were building your team, how did you go out and choose, I want that person in my boat with me?
Well, early on, it was just me and my buddy Joe, who also did not have a job, and we the for the first 4 years, 5 years of the business, we ran it from my basement in the house we were renting in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Um, so he would come over and hang out because he was living with his parents. He didn't have a job, and he would just hang out in the basement and watch TV or play PlayStation or whatever. And I was getting busy enough that it was like, hey, you want to help me? So he didn't know anything about logistics either. So he basically learned from me, so it's kind of like, the dumb leading the dumber. And it was comical, for sure. So,
Well, you've come a
uh,
long ways then, because I know you're really proud of your team right now, and that you're actually adding a new office. So what's next for you?
well, the really exciting times. The import market was down uh, between 35 and 40% last year, and that is the bulk of my business. So we obviously had a tough year last year, coming off the heels of the 2 or 3 best years that we've ever had. So I would say it was probably September, where I decided that if CNT was going to be a player in the market, that we had to make some real changes, and we needed to bring in some real freight professionals.
Sure.
So I'd had a relationship with a mergers and acquisitions guy who, over the last 4 or 5 years, worked at Echo and several other places, was an investment banker, really smart cat, by the name of John Mims. And we had talked over the years about trying to do something together, just kind of never matched up. And in early October, it came together. And my vision of where I wanted to go and his vision of what he felt like he could bring to the table really aligned. And so we spent the majority of fourth quarter building financial models and things that I would have never been able to do on my own, and really putting together a plan. And so we decided to go out and find a real seasoned freight broker, and we interviewed a ton of people and finally landed on a guy down in Chattanooga who is just a fantastic guy, a guy by the name of Darren Browse. And he saw our vision, and he had a really good job with a really large brokerage, and he saw the vision and he really bought into it. So we started him in January, and we've since hired 2 other folks down there, somebody to run a drayage department, and another full truckload broker. And we're in a little office that leaks water from the ceiling, and hopefully it's not still doing that. But it takes me back to the days of when we started in that rental house. Every time it would rain, it would flood. The basement would flood. To the point where I had a pair of rubber boots down at the bottom of the stairs and a shop vac. And we would, some days, would have to get all the water out of there before we could get work. So
I thought freight brokerage was supposed to be glamorous.
oh, it is very glamorous. You should have seen those boots.
I would love it if you had some pictures of the early days that we could share, because those kinds of beginnings are special. When you're going through something difficult with people that you care about, you bond more closely than you would if things were easy. And there's something simple and special about going through hard things with people that you care about.
The funny thing is that I don't have any bad memories of any of that. They were a hard day. I mean, I'm sure, but I don't know if, you just romanticize that.
Yeah.
But I don't remember any. I remember funny stories, funny thing, just it's like ha ha ha, like oh, the basement would flood, or the power would go out, or we spent a whole summer with no air conditioning because our landlord was a terrible person, stuff like that. But in the moment, you know, it was probably bad, but you can sit here and look at it today, and just that was just the sum of the experiences that make for the overall the overall business.
One of my favorite stories that I've heard is a founder that I know getting their first office, which was like a 10 by 20 foot hallway, basically, next to a restaurant. They picked it because when they were inside of it, they could get free Wi-Fi from the gas station next door. And they realized that they could save money on internet until the
Yes,
gas station finally figured out that they were taking all of
I
their
love
data.
it.
And
I
like
love it.
that is such a scrappy and resourceful way of bootstrapping that, again, I have so much respect for it, because it's it's hard work and it takes a lot of sacrifice. And now you get to enjoy some of the fruits of your labor. But I also know you're nowhere near done yet with what your vision for CNT is going to become. What message would you want to send to your own team to keep them aligned to the vision that you have? And what would you want them to hear from you?
Go sell that freight. No, I'm kidding. 60 hours a week. Come on. No. Listen, we've got a great product. We have a great team. We have people that really care about their customers. You know how difficult client acquisition is, especially in a market that's flooded with, 1,000 brokers you've never heard of. And we are one of those. But from a service and from a taking care of the customer standpoint, that's what I want. I don't want quick hitters. I don't want, ooh, look, I made all this money on this one load with a shipper that knows that you fleeced him and he's never going to give you any more business. Treat it like it's your business or your family's business, and take care of them the way you would take care of a friend, and be honest and do really good work. The rest of it takes care of itself.
It's so straightforward when you say it that way that it makes me wonder why more people don't just take that approach. But it's a throwback.
I think it's easy to complicate it. I think it's easy to try to find some. I hate this expression in a way. I can't believe I'm going to say it. I keep hearing the word easy button. And, I'm looking for we're going to be your easy button. No, there are no shortcuts. There's no tricks, any of that. It is just simply hard work, finding people in verticals where you've got experience, or finding opportunities within your own network, and understanding that business and presenting an excitement to the customer, to being excited about the opportunity to help them, because that at the end of the day is really the most important thing. The only person I know, the only person I've ever met that loves to cold call, is my dad, and he absolutely loves it. He would go to one of our biggest customers now. He called on them 22 times before they would talk to him, and 21 times they told him never come back. And that tenacity was impressive to me. And when I asked him about it, he said, they just don't know that I'm here to help them. And I'm committed to helping them, even if they don't know it. And I'm going to continue to present this great product to them, even if they don't know they need it, until I get the opportunity to talk to them about what we're doing and see if it's a fit. No ego attached to it, nothing. And that's a strong message.
It's the opposite of most sales approaches today. And I one of the phrases that I always disliked, you talk about the easy button, I always disliked consultative selling, which was intended, coach people on how to uncover what the client's potential problems are so that you can solve them. I always wondered why it was necessary to coach salespeople to ask questions, because instead of just pitching something. And it felt like a tactic to me. Like, if you ask these 11 questions in the right way, you can unlock this thing. Whereas what you just said, if you simply try to help them, it gets so much easier because your posture is one of contributing to them, not trying to get something from them, which is what most of the time it feels like when someone's selling to you, is they just want something.
The best salespeople I've ever met could care less whether you bought from them or not. Truly, deep down, could care less, because not everything's going to be a yes.
Yeah.
Now, over time, you can come up with a metric that one out of every 10 or one out of every 50 or whatever it might be. And just staying true to that, knowing that you take the same approach every single time, that, we want to show you we care about, your freight or whatever it might be. And keep coming back with that same message with no expectation for anything whatsoever. And if it's a fit, that'll naturally come together.
Yes.
So
It sounds
it's
like
not
you've
rocket
learned.
science.
It sounds like you've learned quite a bit from your father. I also know you've got a young son. Is he maybe perhaps your succession plan? And do you hope one day to have him working alongside you?
If
Or
we're
are
going
you
to go
like,
into,
no, son, go do anything but freight?
no, if we're going to go into the Roblox or Minecraft business, I think Emmett's our guy. No, I mean, we'll see. I'd love to see him go do something in the trades, go be a welder, go
Sure.
learn to drive an excavator, something like that. He's a great kid. Who knows? He's 7, so everything's kind of still on the table with him, but he has not shown much interest in freight other than trucks. But I mean, what 7-year-old boy is not,
Good point.
yeah, enamored with, any kind of truck. So,
Well, my own son, who turns 16 in just a couple of weeks, 5 or 6 years ago, he would start asking me like different types of trucks on the road. And now we'll be driving down, and he looks at me and he go, "I bet you that guy's bobtailing, that guy's deadheading," and he goes, "That's a nice looking kind of Stoger right there." And so he was really interested in the equipment side of it for a couple of years, and so, but it is fun to be able to share something that you love with the people that you love. What do you hope that your son learns from you?
how to be a good human, be kind, you know, assume that other people have good intentions, you know, be honest, um, and, be a good friend, husband. I, I hope he learns those things. Those things you can pretty much work your way through just about anything.
I love that. It's not about even teaching skill. It's about teaching values,
Yeah.
passing on something that you're proud of, and then knowing, like, if your father could hear what you just said, throughout this conversation about him, I'm sure he'd be incredibly proud. And you may have that experience yourself in the not too distant future as the years kind of fly by and you get to see the impact that you have on the next generation. John, I really enjoyed unpacking your story. There's something so straightforward and practical about your approach that speaks to me and is the heart of why we started this silly little podcast, 2.5 years ago. And yeah, we've got a bigger following now, and we're doing video now for the first time this year. And it can get complicated, or it can feel complicated for me sometimes. And conversations like this remind me of why we're doing it, and to keep it simple and just keep focusing on the people and their stories, and good things happen. So again, John, thank you so much. We're all rooting for you.
I appreciate it, Nate, and I really appreciate what you're doing. Giving a voice to, folks that are, you get to hear from the big dogs all the time. And, everybody's story is unique, and there's a lot to learn out there for sure.
Well, thank you. And we'll have to catch up. I want to hear more about your new office opening in a year or two and see how the company is doing and how your team is growing. So we'll follow up with you in the not too distant future.
I look forward to it, Nate. Be well. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Of course. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Bootstrapper's Guide to Logistics, and a special thank you to our sponsors and the team behind the scenes who make it all possible. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the podcast to get the latest updates. To learn more about the show and connect with the growing community of entrepreneurs, visit logisticsfounders.com. And of course, thank you to all the founders who trust us to share their stories.